Let's get on to our third and final main topic today. And our third and final main topic today gets submitted to us by our friend Ronny Shama. And Ronny Shama writes the following. Hey, John, I've been watching since Man of Steel. It's always surprised me how many people have said they started watching me with the Man of Steel review. It's always crazy. With the new ruling on studios being allowed to own theaters, I know you said on Open Mic that you don't think Disney, Paramount, or Warner Brothers are interested in the exhibition business. But what about Universal? They've been trying to cut out the middleman theaters ever since the pandemic started. What are your thoughts? And keep the filthy shielded with a mask. All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And listen, one of the bigger pieces of news over the past couple of days that is really more insider baseball, it's more industry stuff than it is the flash of the celebrities and what's the next big movie. But it's a huge issue. And we started talking about this, Rob, last year when they were saying they were bringing this to the court to have the Paramount consent decrees, which has been around since 48? Is that when they were initiated? I think it might have been 48. Yeah. That they are going to be struck down. And a couple of days ago, it became official. The Paramount consent decrees have been struck down. Now, a lot of people ask, the Paramount what? And to a number of other people, the oversimplification of it has been, oh, that means the studios can own movie theaters. Studios' ability to own movie theaters is a part of what the Paramount consent decrees, which was those laws that were passed. Studios being able to own movie theaters was part of that. But I would argue not even the most important part of it. Now, let's get you guys caught up here for a second. For those of you who don't know what they are, so forgive me, but we're going to jump back into the Campea classroom for a second here. So basically, from the 1930s through to the 1940s and the end of the 1940s, you basically had a studio system that had a total monopoly, although it was multiple companies, a total monopoly on the entertainment industry. You had MGM, you had Fox, you had I believe it was RKO Radio Pictures. That later, I believe, got acquired by Universal at some point. And anyway, they were one of the big, you don't hear of them anymore, but they were one of the big guys. You had Warner Brothers, and who was the fifth? 20th Century Fox. Oh, and of course, you had Paramount, right? So you had these five bodies, these five studios that basically had a controlling interest over everything. What they were basically able to do was they were able to, these studios could own theaters. They could do block booking. We'll talk about block booking in a second. And they were able to enforce regional exclusivity. Regional exclusivity. Now, these were real problems for antitrust when it came to the government, because basically what happened was, with theaters being able to own what was called the vertical market, right? They were able to own the verticals. We produce the content and we're in control of the distribution of the content, and we're in control of the exhibition of that content. That caused some real anti-competitive problems. So at some point, the government stepped in and said, we need to do something about this. And they passed these laws which blocked the practice of block booking. And again, we'll talk about block booking in just a second. Block booking is really, really important here. Block booking is very important. We're going to stop the regional exclusivity, and that's important too. We're going to talk about that in a second. And we hereby command all of you studios, MGM, Fox, RKO, Warner Brothers, Paramount, we hereby command you guys to divest yourselves of your theater ownership. So that's what they did. They have divested themselves of their theater ownership. Okay. So now we fast forward to modern times. And it came out that the government was saying, the Department of Justice was saying, the Paramount decrees, which came out lifetimes ago, is antiquated now. It doesn't really fit. There's no real need for it today. So they have just struck it down. Now, it should be noted that like in the 1990s, I believe Sony owned movie theaters. They owned, I believe they owned Lowe's. I think they owned the Lowe's movie theaters. I think Warner Brothers owned some international theaters. I believe this. So I don't know how that was allowed while the Paramount decrees were still in place, but there was some movie studios owning movie theaters as it was anyway. Okay, so now they've struck it down. So the question becomes, why worry? We're seeing some people online really worried about this whole thing about the government striking down these Paramount decrees. Why are people worried? Okay. The first thing is this. Let's talk about ownership. Theater ownership. If Disney can own a movie theater, let's say Disney, for argument's sake, Rob, let's say Disney buys AMC theaters, right? That's now their theater. That's their theater. They can, if that happens, they can now start to overcharge other studios' movies to play in their theaters. Because it's their theaters, they can give their own movies a competitive advantage. Hell, if they wanted to, they could just not play Paramount's movies in their studio. Hey, this is our theater. We don't have to play a Paramount movie in our theater. We don't have to play a Warner Brothers movie in our theater if we don't want to. You know, all that kind of stuff. So part of the fear is becoming that if Disney owns the entire vertical from creation, distribution, and now the exhibition, the fear is going to be that you could get theaters being owned by studios, and then we start to get into real regional problems. The regional problems are the key thing for a lot of people, because let's say you only live within, like me, I don't have another movie theater that's not an AMC within 10 miles of where I live. Outside of 10 miles, I got a bunch. I got the ArcLight, I got some Regals, but I don't have another movie theater within 10 miles of me other than AMC theaters. Well, what happens if Warner Brothers has Black Adam come out? I can't go to any of my local theaters to see it because, well, sorry, these are Disney-owned theaters. You got to go to the Warner Brothers-owned theaters. So that becomes a fear as well. Now, what I have always said is that this is a non-issue right now. I believe theater ownership by studios is a non-issue right now, mainly because I don't believe in any world or any reality are studios interested in owning movie theaters right now. Owning movie theaters today is very different than it was in 1950s. It is a cutthroat, minimum margin, high risk kind of endeavor that they would much rather have other people doing than them doing it themselves. And, you know, I was reading an article on Deadline, Rob, where they were basically affirming that the Deadline reporters were talking to some industry insiders, say, yeah, none of the studios have any interest in acquiring theaters, I should say. That's not to say that that couldn't change, but hey, it is what it is. Okay, let's see worry number 2. Worry number 2 is about block booking. And Rob, I think you're going to agree with me that this is probably the true biggest worry. This is the true biggest worry. What block booking is basically this. Let's say Disney has Avengers 5, right? Now, what happens normally, what has happened is Disney, as their own distributor, goes to the movie theaters and they negotiate with the theaters about the terms of releasing their movie Avengers 5 in theaters. It can be everything from you have to agree to a minimum 7-week run. You have to agree to giving up 100% of the box office for the first 3 days. It could be, you know, a bunch of different terms and agreements that you can put in there. But the thing is, the key is that you negotiate on a per film basis. That's what it has been under the Paramount decrees. You negotiate for that one movie, and then you make other deals for other movies. What block booking is Disney comes to the theaters and says, oh, you want Avengers 5? Cool. You have to take these 7 other movies too. Basically, Disney could have the power to go to Regal and say, okay, you want to show Avengers 5 in your theaters? Cool. But let me tell you what, we've got Artemis Fowl 2, 3, 4, and 5 coming. We bought the rights to Meet Joe Black, the Revenge, or Meet Joe Dirt. Joe Dirt, The Revenge, parts 2 and 3. And we're decided we're going to do, I don't know, we're going to make a new Pauly Shore detective drama. And we're making all these movies. If you want Avengers 5, you also have to agree to take these 7 other movies. And you have to agree to take them with a minimum of 5 months or a 5-week booking in your theaters and blah, 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 blah. That is something that the studios used to do to the movie theaters back in the 1930s and is one of the main reasons. See, everybody's focusing on, oh, studios can own theaters. The main thing, the main worry was this whole practice of block booking. And under the law, studios were not allowed to do that anymore. Well, why is this an issue? You know, who cares if they do block booking? And those movies are going to come out anyway. Think about this. Think about small studios like, I don't know, A24, right? Let's say small studios like A24. Well, they've got a little movie called, I don't know, My Dad's Ghost. Okay, that sounds like a movie A24 would make. Let's say they're making a movie called My Dad's Ghost. It's a smaller film, whatever, right? Hey, AMC Burbank 16 has 16 screens. There's room out there for A24 to put up My Dad's Ghost. But guess what? Everything's blocked. AMC has to go to A24 and say, you know what? We would love to play My Dad's Ghost. But we made a commitment 3 months ago when we put out Avengers that we were going to take, you know, Artemis Fowl 2, 3, and 4, completing the great trilogy, the quadrilogy of Artemis Fowl coming out, and our screens are booked. Our screens are booked. We have no room. That was kind of the main concern. That is that it would be an unfair advantage of the big studios over the small ones. It's an unfair advantage. Man, I'm terrible at trying to type while I'm doing this at the same time. Unfair advantage of for the big studios over small. Suddenly the small studios are getting pushed out of the theaters altogether and they got nowhere to exhibit their movies anymore. So that became a problem. One of the other big ones, Rob, sight unseen bookings. This is a big one. What happens now is that, let's say Disney wants to put out Artemis Fowl 2 in theaters. Okay. They go to Regal, they go to AMC, they go to Cinemark, and they meet with their individual representatives, and they say, by the way, here's our movie, and they have to show them the movie. So now the Cinemark guy, the booker for Cinemark, he has seen the movie. He knows how good or bad it is. He can make his own determination about how do I think this will perform? Do I think this will bring people out? And okay, we'll agree. So before entering into negotiations about how much cut of the box office gets taken, about how many weeks they're going to do, he's at least now seen the movie and they can negotiate on good faith. Guess what? Without the Paramount decrees, studios don't have to show the theaters the movies first. Studios can now go to the movie theaters and say, we want you to book Artemis Fowl 2. And they say, oh, okay, interesting. Before we negotiate the terms, can we see the movie? Nope. You just have to trust us. It's good. It's going to win all the awards. It's going to win them all. Just trust us. We can't negotiate good faith if we haven't seen the movie. Just trust us. It's great. The Paramount decrees actually mandated that studios had to show the exhibitors the movies first, and now that's gone. There's some other things in here too, but I don't want this to go on too long. Basically, so why would they strike this down? Well, the Justice Department is suggesting here, Rob, what the Justice Department is saying is that, and what the court agreed with them on, is that times are different now than when those rules were implemented. For instance, they wanted to stop studios from having a complete ownership of the vertical, right? From production, distribution, and exhibition. What the court is arguing right now is that, hey, listen, with a lot of streaming going on today, studios already own verticals. Disney owns the production of their movies, the distribution of their movies, and exhibition when it comes to Disney Plus. So like times are different. Plus, we're not really worried that movie theaters want to come in and own. So basically, the Justice Department has said, we don't feel that these antiquated laws are really protecting anybody from anything anymore because times have changed. I agree with that with theater ownership. But I disagree on a couple of other levels. I do think block booking could become a real problem because ultimately that robs us as fans. Rob, take that movie. What was that one with Awkwafina about her grandmother? The one that was just the darling last year. Something, the goodbye, saying goodbye, or the farewell. The farewell is what it was called. we never would have seen, if there was mass block booking, we never would have seen The Farewell. There wouldn't have been screens for it. And so I think that is a problem. I think the sight unseen thing is a problem. But it might be, Rob, listen, we are talking about worst case scenario, though. It very well could be that the Justice Department may be right, and these won't really be an issue anymore. Like, we don't think there's so much competition out there now, because now it's not just 5 studios. There's so much competition now, the Justice Department says, that there's not really a danger of us getting a monopoly again. And maybe they're right. This might turn out to be nothing. I remember when I was working at AMC and the Chinese company Wanda bought us when I was there, we were all worried. Oh, what's this going to change? It turned out it didn't change anything. Like, we're literally, I wouldn't have even known that we were owned by a Chinese company had I not read it in the news. Like, nothing changed. Maybe nothing changes here. Rob, this is a significant piece of news with the Paramount consent decrees being struck down. What do you see as the significance of this? And what do you think maybe are some fears that we should keep our eye on as we move forward?
Well, I think you did a great job of breaking it all down. Again, you know, that the idea that are the studios going to suddenly jump into exhibition? Now, that's a tall order. And I think that now, if there's ever a time that it could happen during this pandemic, obviously movie theaters are not exactly, especially domestic movie theaters, aren't in the best shape. And if there's a time for a takeover, now would be the time. But the real question is, there's also the flip side. In terms of vertical integration, we're now seeing a seismic shift happening in terms of like Mulan going direct to Disney Plus. I mean, the studios, we're moving into waters where exhibition as we know it could change drastically over the next couple of years. I mean, this is going to be a sea change that I could see. We might be in a rapid evolutionary shift right now. And I don't really think that the studios at this point are interested in jumping in and buying theater chains. I just don't see it happening. So I don't think the decrees are it's going to be a worst case scenario now, because if anything, we've got the studios doing the exact opposite. They're like, how can we figure out how to not have movie theaters altogether? You know, we're going to debut films on our streaming platforms, which is really their long-term goal anyway. I mean, Disney, no more physical media. Why go to movie theaters? I mean, why not control their own direct distribution and cut out the middleman entirely, which is a direction I think that they're heading in. So I don't really think that rescinding these decrees is going to affect that much in the long run, because right now exhibitors are fighting for their very existential lives, and they are facing an existential threat. So I don't think we have to worry too much, but assuming this goes away and movie theaters are suddenly acquired by Disney or Amazon or whomever, what you were describing could very well come to pass. There could be a lot of bad practices, but I just don't see that happening. I think right now we should be more worried and focused on whether movie theaters are going to come back, whether we're going to have the kind of exhibition we all know and love.
Well, that all depends on how quickly we get past this pandemic.
I know. And frankly, you know, I don't think movie studios, I hope, because what's going to happen is when you have AMC, their job is to provide, they teamed up with Dolby. They gave us AMC Theater, the Dolby theaters that are awesome. You know, you want a company whose job is dedicated to the idea of showing films. Movie studios are like, they should make movies. You know, I'd rather have companies like AMC that were spending $5 billion to upgrade their theaters and give people the best experience they could have, because that's their one job. And I hope that stays the same, because, I mean, as much as Disney might be in the service, you know, they do great with their theme parks, but do we really want Disney controlling movie theaters too? I don't know, man.
See, here's the other big thing too. You got to remember, with Disney as a specific example, Disney is not in the position to make any major acquisitions right now. They just spent over half their liquid value acquiring Fox. Yep. And they've taken a huge financial hit with the pandemic as well. So Disney's not really in the place to make, but I've been reading, Rob, I've been reading in places like The Wrap and Deadline and others, Netflix for the last couple of years has been very, very interested in getting a physical brick and mortar presence in movie theaters and owning movie theaters. Amazon, we know, is at least in a curious way interested in buying movie theaters. We talked before, I have no doubt that there is a possibility that Amazon could end up owning AMC. It could be Amazon Movie Cinemas is what AMC is going to stand for moving forward, right? And that could be interesting because you see these companies, these new companies. That's the interesting thing, Rob. It's these new cutting edge companies like Netflix, like Amazon. They seem to have more interested in getting into the physical space of movie theater ownership than the old model companies like Disney or Warner Brothers or whatever. And it could be interesting. I have
to tell you, I could see that because as Netflix makes movies more like the old guard that become, let's say the old guard, The Irishman, they've announced that $200 million action film with the Russo brothers.
Netflix.
Why wouldn't they put that in movie theaters first? If Amazon controls their entire pipeline, they would get the added benefit of getting these big, because the old guard was a movie that we would all have paid to go see. That would have been a summer movie that we would have gone to the theater to see. And why wouldn't they get that, and it still gets to be put on their streaming service? If it made sense, I mean, if Netflix could get some of that Disney cheddar from last year, they might not have an end game, but eventually they might. They've announced they're looking for the next Star Wars, the next Harry Potter, and if they come up with that, why not show it in theaters first?
Yeah,
I could see that happening.
All right, the question here is, guys, granted, the whole Paramount, consent decrees is a little bit inside baseball. It's more industry based, all kind of stuff, but it is kind of fascinating. What do you guys think about this? Do you think there should be fears, some legitimate worries moving forward? Do you think the Justice Department is right? It's like, listen, times have changed so much. These laws are a little bit antiquated. Either way, it is a major piece of legislation in the history of Hollywood that has now been struck down. What do you guys think about it? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys.